Haven't got the heart to stand those memories when my heart.
Bon dia a totes i a tots. Benvinguts a la segona sessió de les Jornades Obertes, l'Aliança UPV-Ciutat per a la Missió Climàtica València 2030. Continuant amb el protocol formal d'apertura de la sessió, dono la paraula al director de l'Escola Tècnica Superior d'Arquitectura, el senyor Iván Cabrera.
Gracias, vicerrector. Unas palabras muy breves en nombre de todas y todos los que componemos el colectivo de la Escuela Técnica Superior de Arquitectura de la Universitat Politècnica de València. Primero, muchísimas gracias a Carla en representación de la cátedra por escoger la Escuela de Arquitectura para acoger estas jornadas. La verdad es que nos sentimos honrados. Arquitectas y arquitectos somos responsables fundamentales del diseño y la materialización de los espacios construidos y por tanto de gran parte del hábitat construido, y por ello nos sentimos responsables de las virtudes e inconvenientes que este hábitat genera, pero sobre todo también de cómo debemos modelar y modificar nuestras maneras de hacer para hacer un futuro posible ahora que tenemos un conocimiento más profundo de cuáles son las consecuencias de aquello que nuestra profesión y las actividades humanas suponen para el planeta. Espero que sea una jornada tremendamente productiva y nuevamente tan solo reiterar el agradecimiento por venir a esta casa. Gracias.
Moltes gràcies, director. A continuació té la paraula la senyora Carla Montagut, directora de la Càtedra de Transició Energètica Urbana de la UPV.
Buenos días a todos. Este año, y con motivo de estas jornadas, se presentarán los avances más recientes en los binomios Universidad-Ciudad de Valencia, en el caso de la Universitat Politècnica de València y la Universidad de Valencia para la Misión Climática València 2030. Del lado de la Universitat Politècnica de València se presentarán los avances realizados en el Living Lab desde su lanzamiento en octubre del año pasado, por estas mismas fechas, en las jornadas que organizamos con título La UPV responde a la misión València Ciutat Neutra, que fueron organizadas por la alianza de 12 cátedras de esta universidad. Estas 12 cátedras comparten un mismo objetivo, la transición ecológica. Y como no podía ser de otra manera, decidimos comenzar por nuestra casa, la Universitat Politècnica de València. Desde entonces, esta alianza de 12 cátedras ha colaborado de forma sinérgica con el Vicerrectorado de Desarrollo Sostenible de los campus de la UPV. Esta colaboración ha dado lugar a distintas iniciativas, tales como la elaboración de escenarios UPV de neutralidad climática y la gran encuesta sobre acciones para descarbonizar la UPV, así como los primeros avances en la iniciativa Living Lab en la Escuela Técnica Superior de Ingeniería Industrial, que fueron realizados en colaboración con la Cátedra de Transición Energética Urbana, la cual dirijo. Los detalles de todos estos proyectos se presentarán a lo largo de las jornadas de hoy. Esperamos que de manera cíclica, el año que viene, nos podamos volver a juntar y presentar nuevos avances sobre estos temas. Gràcies.
Moltes gràcies, Carla. A continuació té la paraula la vicerectora de Sostenibilitat, Cooperació i Vida Saludable de la Universitat de València, la senyora Pilar Serra.
Muchas gracias, vicerrector. En primer lugar, saludar a los miembros de la mesa, a la directora general de Cambio Climático, Celsa Monrós. Esto se me ha parado justo en el mejor momento. Sí, al director de la Escuela de Arquitectura, Iván Cabrera, y a la directora de la Cátedra de Transición Energética, Carla Montagu, que me consta que has trabajado mucho para la organización de esta jornada. Por supuesto, al vicerrector. Muchas gracias por la invitación a la Universidad de Valencia a participar en esta jornada. Es para nosotros un verdadero placer poder compartirla con vosotros. Realmente el cambio climático y la sostenibilidad en general requiere de grandes alianzas, de cooperación entre instituciones y sociedad. Y las universidades no podemos quedarnos al margen y debemos, por tanto, dar ejemplo de esas alianzas y de esa cooperación. Tenemos un papel muy importante en las universidades que va más allá de nuestras piedras angulares, si podemos llamarla así, la formación y la investigación. Como servicio público que somos, tenemos entre nuestros fines fomentar el desarrollo intelectual y material de los pueblos y la defensa ecológica del medio ambiente. Somos instituciones con un, permítanme llamarlo así, un público muy importante, nuestro estudiantado, y digo público porque muchas veces nos observan desde cierta distancia y como debe ser nos juzgan por nuestras acciones y no por nuestras palabras, por nuestros hechos. Es un colectivo que se encuentra en un periodo vital de crecimiento y de madurez, y para quienes son de gran relevancia todas las influencias que reciben durante esta etapa, durante su vida académica. Entonces, deben poder observar que el abordaje de la sostenibilidad requiere de un compromiso de todas las esferas sociales, por lo que aquí estamos reunidas hoy las dos universidades públicas de la ciudad de Valencia para seguir dando ejemplo con nuestras acciones. Y en este caso, acciones también que está previsto que se organicen en colaboración con otra institución local, el Ayuntamiento de Valencia, que ahora pues estamos de enhorabuena con la capitalidad verde que conseguimos ayer. Precisamente ayer también concluíamos en el Congreso Internacional de Salud Urbana que organizamos en la Universidad de Valencia la importancia de unir esfuerzos y de colaborar, alinear nuestras acciones entre gobierno, universidades y sociedades cívicas, y todo esto desde una perspectiva crítica. Desde este vicerrectorado, desde la Universidad de Valencia, estamos comprometidos con el cumplimiento de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible desde las diferentes áreas que lo componen, y estamos muy contentos de que hoy nos hayan dado altavoz para contar también algunas de nuestras iniciativas. Tenemos aquí la presentación hoy de nuestras iniciativas de comercio justo y de proximidad y de la mejora de infraestructura verde urbana para promocionar la biodiversidad. Por tanto, muy agradecido, muchas gracias a todos por la organización y espero que la disfruten.
Moltes gràcies, vicerectora. I a continuació té la paraula la senyora directora general de Canvi Climàtic de la Generalitat Valenciana, Celsa Monrós.
Moltes gràcies. Bé, jo primer de res felicitar-vos per l'organització d'aquestes jornades. Crec que són molt importants perquè a més inclou la paraula aliança i trobo que s'estan fent aliances efectivament, com ha comentat la vicerectora de Sostenibilitat, Pilar, a tots els nivells. O sigui, és una aliança de ciutat en universitat, però també estem parlant de l'aliança de totes les càtedres, aliança en altres universitats, en l'Ajuntament, en els actors de la ciutat, però a nivell també regional i després en altres països i a nivell internacional. I tot això, quan se treballa en aliances i se treballa en ambició, se tradueix en resultats reals i, a més, valorats i posats en valor no sols per nosaltres mateixos, sinó a nivell internacional. Ho hem vist ahir en la capital verda europea, ho hem vist també acollint el Congrés Internacional de Salut Urbana, com una de les 100 ciutats de la missió Ciutat Neutra. Crec que som ambiciosos en aquests moments, que a més ho estem fent en serietat, que estem unint-nos en tots aquells actors que tenen alguna cosa a dir i que saben, i és a partir de dades, de coneixement, d'estratègia i d'ambició que podem assolir els reptes que ens estem plantejant, que són uns reptes apassionants, però sobretot necessaris, perquè tot això es comença perquè estem en una emergència climàtica, perquè les dades de tots els estudis que estem veient cada volta són més esferidors. La darrera va ser la de l'estudi de l'Ancet, que va ser fa poc, vull dir, estem en les mesures que ens hem compromès fins ara a apropar-nos als 2,5 graus d'ascens de temperatures. Ara mateix portem 1,1 o 1,2 i estem veient el resultat en tots els rècords de vents extrems que estem vivint en l'any en el que estem. Vull dir, estem a punt d'entrar en novembre i segurament avui arribarem una altra volta als 30 graus. Vull dir, tot això és realment molt preocupant, però trobo que ho estem encarant. No estem espentant cap endavant dient ja arribarà 2030 o ja arribarà 2050, sinó que ens posem fites molt més avant. La de la capital verda serà en 2024, vull dir, i ho estem fent junts. I jo crec que és la manera de fer-ho i per això vos dono l'enhorabona.
Moltes gràcies, directora general. Bé, i finalment, en nom institucional de la Universitat Politècnica de València, benvolguts companys de taula, directora general, vicerectora, directora de la càtedra, director de l'escola. Formalment, molt bon dia de nou, benvinguts i benvingudes a la Universitat Politècnica de València per la celebració d'aquesta jornada. Avui és un dia d'alegria, ja que la ciutat de València va ser reconeguda ahir mateix com a capital verda europea 2024. Això ens dona més energia per continuar impulsant una societat més sostenible i amb més futur. La Missió Climàtica de València és extraordinàriament important perquè mostra d'una manera que tota la ciutadania pot entendre quines són les prioritats. Expressa un compromís i defineix un pla. Permet a totes i a tots visualitzar cap on va l'estratègia de la ciutat, les inversions i l'acció de govern. A més, és una forma de que tots entenguem el que és important, siguem capaços de comprendre les accions i els resultats i de poder exigir el compliment d'objectius en un termini definit. La Universitat Politècnica de València és una comunitat de més de 30.000 persones que estudien, treballen, innoven i transfereixen coneixement a la societat. Som una institució amb un fort compromís ambiental. Des de 2009 som l'única universitat espanyola certificada a EMAS, el segell europeu que persegueix la millora contínua en matèria de medi ambient. I a més, la UPV es situa entre les millors universitats en les classificacions verdes, en les classificacions d'universitats verdes a nivell internacional. Com a universitat tecnològica líder a Espanya, podem contribuir a l'esforç col·lectiu de la neutralitat climàtica de moltes maneres. En primera persona, com a organització, aspirem a ser la primera universitat espanyola neutra en emissions de carboni i volem aconseguir-ho utilitzant tot el coneixement i la innovació que produïm. Tenim l'objectiu de desenvolupar les nostres activitats formatives i d'investigació optimitzant els recursos disponibles, preservant els nostres entorns naturals i garantint el mínim impacte ambiental. A part de fer-ho en primera persona com a organització, també en segona persona, amb vosaltres, amb tots i totes, des de la nostra posició per ajudar a generar conscienciació, col·laborant en la detecció d'oportunitats d'innovació i compartint ferramentes d'innovació oberta que posem a l'abast de l'entorn socioeconòmic. I també en tercera persona, per als altres, per a ells i a elles, treballant per a desenvolupar els nous coneixements i tecnologies que seran necessaris per ajudar a empreses, administracions i, en definitiva, als ciutadans. Per tot això, la Universitat Politècnica de València s'ha compromès a fer costat a la ciutat de València per assolir la neutralitat climàtica en 2030. Fruit d'aquest compromís hem recolzat amb tota l'energia possible el llançament de les ambicioses 8 consultes preliminars al mercat de la ciutat, que són consultes on una ciutat moderna, amb amplitud de mires i ambició estratègica, busca identificar idees innovadores per aconseguir complir una missió gens senzilla. la neutralitat climàtica en 2030. Estem convençuts que n'hi ha molt bones idees latents que hem de treure la llum i que l'aportació de tots els agents de l'ecosistema innovador de la Comunitat Valenciana serà clau. Actualment, 8 propostes de la Universitat Politècnica de València de les 28 que es van presentar a aquest procés de consulta preliminar al mercat estan en procés d'entrevista amb l'Ajuntament de València i segur que alguna més avançarà pel mateix camí. L'extraordinària tasca de la Càtedra de Transició Energètica Urbana incrementa el compromís de la universitat en aquesta missió. Tenim per davant una agenda avui interessantíssima amb aportacions internacionals i una mostra d'iniciatives concretes d'accions col·laboratives universitat-ciutat, en les que coneixerem el camí que es va recorrent i com continuar avançant. En definitiva, fem nostra la Missió Climàtica de València, fem nostra la visió de la ciutat i apostem per contribuir amb la màxima intensitat possible per un futur més pròsper i sostenible. Junts ho aconseguirem. Vos desitge una molt fructífera jornada i formalment declare oberta esta sessió d'avui. Moltes gràcies.
Buenos días. Bueno, creo que hay que felicitarse. Lo primero que hay que hacer es felicitarse, ¿no? por el éxito de la capitalidad verde, ¿no? de ayer. Yo creo que es una buenísima noticia, ¿no? En un foro como este es importante. No sé si me conocéis, yo soy José Luis Alapont, director de área de Transición Verde del Vicerrectorado de Campus. Y bueno, pues la misión que tengo hoy es conducir el acto. Vamos a tener varios bloques. Inicialmente vamos a tener 2 ponencias que van a ser como 2 presentaciones de mayor duración. Y después se presentará un bloque de iniciativas, tanto de la UPV como de la UV, que se están desarrollando en el ámbito de la misión climática y del binomio binomio ciudad-universidades. Entonces, bueno, pues vamos a intentar, este mensaje es para los ponentes, vamos a intentar ajustarnos al tiempo, porque la sesión es larga y tenemos bastantes cosas que contar. Y habrá un bloque final, en el que presentaremos, bueno, se va a presentar el Living Lab durante la sesión, pero presentaremos la convocatoria que va a lanzar el Vicerrectorado para ideas dentro de la UPV o desde la UPV para poder empezar a desarrollar este Living Lab. Todo eso va a ser a lo largo de la mañana. Como decía, va a ser una mañana intensa y con mucho trabajo y bueno, pues espero que a todo el mundo le parezca interesante. Voy a presentar al primer ponente, que es Andy van den Dobbelstein. Él es profesor titular de la Facultad de Arquitectura y Medio Ambiente Construido o Entorno Construido de la Universidad de Delft, de la TU de Delft. Es profesor de diseño climático y sostenibilidad, si lo digo bien. Ha participado, bueno, también es profesor investigador en el Instituto para Soluciones Avanzadas Metropolitanas de Ámsterdam y ha participado de forma muy destacada, como yo bien sé, en varias competiciones como asesor de los equipos del Solar Decathlon, de la competición Solar Decathlon. Y desde enero de 2021 es coordinador de sostenibilidad de la Universidad Tecnológica de Delft. Así que nada, él va a hablar, el título de su ponencia es The Sustainable Campus, Designing Universities as if it is 2050 today. The floor is yours.
Ya. Buenos días, muchas gracias para invitarme aquí en Valencia. Hablo solo un poco español, entonces voy a presentar en inglés, ¿ok? Okay. Good morning. My name is Andy. Well, I was introduced already by José Luis. My message basically is that we need to start to think ahead in the future. We should actually, as somebody with a mouse, it's flying in space. We should be focusing actually on the future rather than building our built environment in a way that we used to. And if we build according to our rules at the moment, we are actually building according to the past, because the rules, the regulations are always lagging and based on the climate of 30 years ago and not of the climate of the future. So to talk about sustainable campuses, what do we mean with sustainable? If we think, well, it's basically everything. It's about ecology, economy, it's social things, it's about resources, it's about health, about energy, water. I like this definition that was given by my teaching master, Jon Christensen. It's about future generations, and it's not about us. It's about what we leave to future generations and what they actually want to inherit from us. So I think that's what we should keep in mind all the time, that we shouldn't do this for ourselves, but for the future. Now, what are the requirements for that future? Basically, I teach my students to take care of these 4 things, and these are different from previous generations of architects and planners. We have to become climate adaptive because the climate is already changing rapidly. So our built environment as we know it should be apt to that new climate already, the climate of 2050. We should also become carbon neutral to avoid runaway climate change in the long run, to avoid complete disaster. What helps to do so is to become circular in everything we use in our resources. But it also has a positive note, because we can add so much more value to cities and to our living environment by becoming sustainable, by becoming greener and cleaner. I will give some examples later. So let's start with climate adaptation. We know that there's already more extreme weather. Look at the record-size hailstones that we've had, but storms also. Insurance companies know that there's more claims for damage nowadays than it used to be in the past. Forest fires, it has been a problem in the last few summers. Maybe in Northern Europe we haven't seen it yet, but if you see that even in Siberia there's been huge forest fires, we should be careful. It's getting so dry in summertime that every country could light up like this. In the Netherlands, we are a relatively cool country, but we had a record temperature 3 years ago of 40.7, and the previous record was 38.6, and it was from 1944. So it was an enormous increase, as if we were running the 100-meter sprint, not in 9.52, but in 8.9 or something. And what people forget sometimes is that these measurements for meteorological institutes is always done in the countryside, at airports, in open fields, not in the cities. And we know that cities are actually much hotter in heat waves. And this is due to the urban heat islands effect. It's a natural phenomenon that solar heat is basically absorbed in surfaces and then radiated as heat. But there's more. In cities, it's not just the sun. Maybe the sun is the most important one, but we also have what I call anthropogenic heat, waste heat emitted by vehicles, by buildings, but also by air conditioning. And of course, in many cities of Europe, we haven't been designed to withstand tropical temperatures. It's a different attitude we need. And I always find it very interesting to climb on roofs and see what is the roofscape, because then you see it's basically a desert of stony material, tiles, bituminous roofing, steel. So it's no wonder that cities heat up a lot, because when the sun is shining here, and it wasn't when I was visiting, but this can go up to 80 degrees in summertime when there's the sun shining on the black roofing system. So we need to bring back nature into cities, much more than we do now. This is a roof that was there already for 15 years. Green is so much important because it has so many advantages. We know, of course, it absorbs CO2 and fine dust particles, but it also helps to retain rainwater within the city and helps to cool the city. It brings biodiversity, but also people still need a natural environment. We are still like a traditional human being that is used to being in nature, so we have to bring it back. What we also experienced in Europe in the last few years, and this is just Europe, I'm not talking about other parts of the world, but is floods, and in times when floods weren't so common, like in the middle of summer. This was last year. Germany, Belgium and the Netherlands, the south of the Netherlands, were flooded completely. Already 15 years ago, we said we should actually develop so-called water urbanism. Urbanism that has much more space for rainwater to be stored. And then, of course, you need to design it in such a way that the buildings will be safe. Or we need to think about floating houses in areas that could be flooded, like this architecture that was designed already 15 years ago, but has never been built, actually. What I did myself together with the team is, in the Netherlands, we tend to build buildings in areas below sea level, because almost half of our country is below sea level, and we can keep it dry by pumping out the water every now and then, but there's a flood risk, and civil engineers calculated that this particular area, it's one of the polders, the deepest polder at the moment, 7 meters below sea level, that a flood could happen once every 100 years of 1.3 meters. And they asked us and other teams come up with a solution where the houses are safe. And the cheapest solution was actually to raise the level of construction by 1.3 meter. Then you need 3 meters of sea sand to deposit in the area, and then it sags a little bit and you keep a safe height. But I thought architectural designs are much more interesting. You can make split level houses, you can make floodable carports, you just have to take out the car in time. You can make water resistant walls, aquarium glass. That's interesting that you have aquarium glass, and at one time it's a pitch of grass, and the next time it's fish swimming around and neighbors who don't have a safe house. So it can be really funny. But the message is we should also take climate change as an interesting challenge for architects and planners to think differently. In cities, it's very important to keep as much rain as we can within the city and not flush it to the rivers so that we lose it. And then we get a drought period again, and we have problems again. So new roofs have been developed that can store a lot of water in it, and these are green blue roofs, polder roofs sometimes, and that helps. But once water hits the ground floor, so-called water squares can also be a good solution. There's been 2 that have been applied in Rotterdam, and this was our plan for Sevilla, where we also proposed there's ever less rain in Sevilla, so every drop we need to keep it, and so that's why storing it in the underground and flooding these squares is one of the options. It's only temporary, and kids love it, because at one time it's dry and the next time there's water and they can play with the water, and so it gives added value to a city if you apply these new technologies. So we have to prepare buildings for a different climate. They have to become sturdier, stronger for storms. We have to capture rainwater and use it, design safely for floods. We have to learn from vernacular examples elsewhere. So we in the north, we need to learn from Southern Europe, because you know how to build houses comfortably without using technology if we look back in history. So we need to think more like Southern Europeans and design buildings as if we have no energy and we have no technology. How would we design these buildings in a warmer climate like we're getting now? And maybe in Spain you should start to learn from North African cities. But I think cooling can often be avoided by bioclimatic design. And bioclimatic design is designing with the optimal use of local circumstances in your building. Even here in Valencia, I know the average temperature is only 16 degrees. That means that the soil down below us always has around that temperature. So we have free cooling from the soil if we are smart about it, but we have to design smartly and not be heated up too much. Well, heat pump systems then are a good solution for many parts of Europe, I think, because if you need to cool and you need to heat, then this is the most efficient way. But we should be careful that it's not air-to-air heat pumps that blow out heat again in the city in summertime, because then we're heating up the city again. So converting solar energy into electricity and hot water also helps to cool the cities, because you take away a little bit of the potential of the solar irradiation. And then, of course, use more green, what I already mentioned. Now, I think in real hot parts of Europe, and this is a picture of Palermo in Sicily, this city has been close to 50 degrees 2 times already in the last 2 years. And that means that it becomes uninhabitable. So we need to start cooling cities. And I mean to do so by putting in tubes in pavement, in tarmac, to take away the heat in summertime and store it perhaps underground for the winter, or use it for hot purposes. But we need to start doing different things, because cities will not be inhabitable anymore soon. So that's where climate adaptation actually goes well together with climate mitigation. Which brings me to carbon neutrality. I can recommend, I'm not showing it now because it takes almost 8 minutes, but it's a short film about energy consumption. It's called Energy Slaves. You can find it on YouTube. It won an Oscar in the Netherlands for special films. But it's a nice film to show how much energy we use in a house and what it would mean if we had to generate that electricity ourselves. What I also organized is a MOOC, a massive open online course. It's for free, starts in January again, where you can learn how to make zero energy designs of buildings. And this was, in 2020, this was announced as the best course online in the world. So I'm happy and proud about that. But what I basically do is teach the students in that course and at TU Delft to take these steps to reduce the energy demand and to make it zero energy overall. It starts with always understanding the local circumstances, the climate, the underground, the surroundings, the ecology, the materials that you can use. Then start to think about reducing, then reusing waste energy, and finally producing renewable energy. So it always starts actually with reducing, and that's sometimes forgotten. We tend to think about how to produce our energy sustainably, but it starts with the demand. And on the left-hand side you see architectural possibilities to save energy. And the bold ones are the ones that you can still apply in an existing building when you renovate it. But we also have a lot of equipment that we need anyway in buildings, and then we can take energy efficient ones rather than traditional ones. Heat recovery systems of step 2 are well known nowadays, especially in the north, where we have to recover all the heat we have in a building. So there's various options for that. Newer is to recover heat from wastewater, especially from showers, for instance, but why not also from kitchen sinks or sewage? In cities, it's much more interesting to think beyond the building, because every building has a different energy pattern. And here you can see the energy patterns of different functions. I'm sorry, the names are in Dutch, but you can recognize a hospital, supermarket, office, dwelling, ice skating rink, shop, school, and swimming pool. Each one has different demands for heat, cold, and electricity per square meter, as you can see. And that means that actually we're stupid if we just look at buildings separately and try to make them sustainable. We should think much more within this urban scale and be smart about exchanging energy between the buildings. Buildings that need cooling always produce waste heat that they basically blow out into the air. So we have to think differently, and a student of mine who graduated on this did that. So he looked at a supermarket, and supermarkets are cooling all year round, even in wintertime. And they are emitting the heat into the air, and it's get lost. But he designed a system that actually connects the supermarket to the buildings next door, and thereby he could save 60% of the carbon emissions, and he didn't make a plan for renovation at all. So this was just the energy system becoming smarter. So I think in cities we need to start thinking on the larger scale. And if it's not within a building block, then you can also think about low temperature heat networks and cold networks that can provide buildings with temperatures of 25 to 40 degrees coming from waste heat, coming from the water, coming from the soil, supermarkets again, and then also provide cold in wintertime. Now, I live in a country where we are lucky that we have a lot of aquifer system possibilities in the underground, so we can store heat and cold interseasonally. Yeah, many other countries have the same thing. If you're near to the coast, that's usually an option. Do that because it makes systems much more resilient. We also, of course, need to make every surface productive. So we have to make roofs productive in a sense, like either green or produce a lot of energy. And here you see an example of that. But there's just one disadvantage of this. There's a lot of solar panels here, but you probably know when they are producing most of the electricity here. It's in the middle of summer and it's in the middle of the day when the sun is high. So we have a problem of storing that energy and use it in wintertime when we have a shortage. So we can use batteries, but batteries don't outlast the whole season. We can convert it to hydrogen as a storage for wintertime, but then you lose more than 50% of the original power. And we need another infrastructure. Hydrogen is a very thin gas that evades easily. We can also turn them into e-fuels, so basically toying around a little bit with carbon dioxide and water and electricity, and then the C and the H and the O gets connected to a fuel again, like diesel or petrol. But it costs a lot of energy at the moment and it's still very expensive. We can also start to think differently. Why would we put solar panels always on the roof, optimally to the south? In many countries, especially in northern countries, the sun is much lower than here, and it's much better to use the facade for that. And this is an example of a social housing project where they had that. It gives a better spread of the production over the day, because if you have vertical panels on the east, it produces in the morning, on the west in the evening. If you put them on the south, then in wintertime with a low sun, you still have production. So it's much smarter to think about that. But this was there are much nicer examples of PV panels that you can use. This is a newer generation of solar panels, and you don't recognize them as solar panels because they are basically, in this case, it's printed. So they don't have to be ugly. Architects can start to design with it in all colors. And this is actually the real built house of it. José Luis knows it. This was built in Wuppertal. It's still there to be visited, just as the UPV pavilion. But what you see here, the blue panels are PV panels, so they produce electricity. And they can be printed in any color of the rainbow. So that makes it really nice for architects to start thinking like this. The interior of it is completely circular, bio-based materials. It's demountable completely. So that's also very important to save a lot of energy and carbon emissions. So that brings me to circularity. Circular construction on the one hand side is using technical materials, concrete, steel, plastics, as long as possible by reusing and recycling them. But there's also a biological cycle that is with bio-based materials, plants that should be grown sustainably and be used again. But there's also an option to, our cities basically are urban mines that have a lot of materials in them that should be recovered, because most countries in Europe are not so rich in resources, so we have to recover everything we have. And the other way is that I tell building companies and commissioners that they should never work again with companies that don't want to take back their own products, because if they don't want to take back their products, they don't know what to do with it in recycling or reusing. So if you buy those products, they're a total mess for the future, because what are you going to do with it? So only work with companies that take back their stuff, either, so maybe you don't have to be owning it, it might also be that you just rent the service of it, or you have a lease or a deposit system. Procurement is very important. Procurement is the purchasing of everything we have, furniture, equipment, materials, clothes. We have to reduce it simply, and this R level is very important. So it refers to these things that we use in cities and universities. But we can't solve everything as academics. We don't know how to produce these products, and so we have to sort of start making circular contracts with suppliers and manufacturers so that they solve it in their chain. And if they can't solve it themselves, they have to bring it back to the producer or the original person who started with it. Another thing regarding circularity is that we need to stop demolishing things. Because if we demolish a building and build a new one which is super sustainable, okay, it can be completely energy neutral, but the materials, to make the materials, cost an enormous amount of energy and carbon emissions. And you see that here on the left-hand side, you see the forest that is needed to sort of replace our Faculty of Architecture at TU Delft. And on the right-hand side, you see if we completely strip it of its facade, its building services, its interior, and then make it energy neutral as well. That's a very strong scenario, but even then it's only 1/3 of the emissions of a new constructed building. So we really have to think in renovation and transformation before we start thinking about a new building. So that brings me to corporate responsibility. In corporate responsibility, I mean responsibility for us, universities and cities. Yesterday we had a talk during dinner about our small influence as small countries in the world. And you see this is the Netherlands, this is Spain. I could have indicated Sweden as well. Sweden is rather big, but with a low number of people. But it seems like small countries in the world. And what we do, does it have an influence or not? Well, actually this is the real world. And here you see Holland and Spain again, in its real size, because this is the space we need for our resources, for our energy, for our water, for our food. And where we take it, you can see on the map. It's from the southern part of the world. Those countries are actually smaller than they are in real. So this is why we are important, and we should set an example by doing this. And for the Netherlands, for instance, each Dutch person needs about 6 global hectares for themselves, and in the Netherlands we only have 0.9 hectares per person. So how the hell are we going to do it? We need to do something about that. So I thought, already years ago, I was driving my camper van through northern France, and I came across this nice town called Écoumont, and it's Eco-Man. I thought, I need to take a picture and I need to make a vow. And I thought, if we want a sustainable society, each one of us needs to become sustainable, because we can't say, you, government, you need to do it, or companies, you need to do it, or neighbor, you need to do it. I'm not. I want to fly, I want to eat meat, I want to do everything. Every one of us has to become sustainable, because otherwise society will never be. So that's when I started measuring my own life. I live in Delft, on the edge of the inner city. It's relatively modern, you see it, it's well insulated, but still the energy bill was quite high, so I did a lot of things and I presented it to students to see how I brought down my energy bill. So I'm nearly zero carbon emissions. I only have a heat pump system that I share with my neighbors, and I don't purchase that power, so I think it's grey power, it's not sustainable power. That's the only carbon emissions I still have. This is the camper van that I was talking about. It's lovely, but it's an old dirty diesel. But I don't use it so often, and then you see that my car actually emits more carbon than my house does. I'm a vegetarian, so I emit much less. I will show that later. And then this is half a trip to Vietnam. I had to go to Vietnam for my work, but I added a small holiday and then thought, okay, the trip back should be mine. But you see that one single trip from Vietnam to back to the Netherlands is the biggest contributor to my carbon emissions. I also work at TU Delft, and these are the emissions related to my work. Each one of you are also contributing to the emissions of UPV, because UPV is not a person, so you can't say UPV, you need to be carbon neutral. No, we are all part of it. So this is the architecture faculty, and it was renovated in 2013, you can see that. So the heat demand was reduced by 50%, but electricity remained the same. So when I compared myself with the average Dutchman, I was doing quite fine actually, but I was forgetting one thing, of course. You're going to see it now. And that's flying for TU Delft. All these conferences, all these European research projects, master classes in Australia, meetings, travels with students for excursions. This was terrible. So in 2018 I still had 12 tons of CO2 for flying alone, and that's more than the average Dutchman. So I thought I need to stop flying, especially in Europe. So what I did then is I purchased a carbon killer certificate. What they do is they purchase permits of carbon emissions of the ETS system off the European market and then destroy them. So it means that the whole permission of carbon emissions in Europe is going down. I didn't save them, of course, but industry somewhere needs to do it. So my emissions now are down, so that makes it look better. But it means that TU Delft had to become sustainable, because that was my biggest climate sin. In 2019 we already published a position paper stating our university supports climate science and that we need to take action. In 2021 we started a big climate action program, a research program with millions of euros in it for researchers to fill the gaps of knowledge on climate action. And I myself became the climate action coordinator at the campus, so a sustainability coordinator. And I published this vision, ambition and action plan early this year, and it was approved by the executive board. What we do is look at education first. So all our students need to know the basics of climate change and what to do about it. So we need to get it in all education. In research, I think we should use the campus much more as a living lab and to demonstrate things, to test out things, because a city won't test out innovative things if there's a risk attached. We try to involve the whole community, which is students, academic staff, supporting staff, management, but also external parties that are on the campus and the city itself. And the biggest chunk of my work is related to operations, to the functioning of the university. It's about what we do on the campus and from the campus. So a lot of these things need to be tackled. Oh, this doesn't come across, but this was an image showing the collaboration we have between all the faculties and all the supporting divisions. And this shows that we went through a whole process of engagement, of discussing with the community on the campus, so with all the students and staff. We had a lot of presentations with our plans. Our rector actually hoped that people would say, no, we're not going to do this, this is you're asking too much. So he was hoping for a softer plan, but what in fact happened is that the plans went stricter. So they became stricter than we originally proposed because people are worried, and especially students, because it's their future. So that's how we adjusted it. So the basic idea is that we want to practice what we teach and preach on the campus. And it means that we should actually show this on the campus. We are also going to be carbon neutral by 2030, circular, climate adaptive. And climate adaptive means that by 2030 we are ready for the climate of 2050. We also want to improve biodiversity and quality on the campus. And we should expose much more what we are doing rather than keeping it hidden behind the walls. Now I believe it starts with carbon accounting, because we don't know where we want to go if we don't know where we stand. So we need to know what our emissions are, and there's the greenhouse gas emission protocol that you can use for it with different scopes. But it doesn't say a lot if you see these figures. So I always like to translate it into forest area. So the forest that is needed to compensate for the carbon emissions. And here you see in colors the forest size projected onto the city of Delft. So the gray line behind it is the city of Delft. And we see that we need about 1.5 times the area of Delft to compensate for our emissions. But that's only half of it, because later we found out what procurement means. Procurement of furniture, of materials, of coffee cups, of computers. And procurement alone is as big as everything else together here. So that's an enormous thing. It means that we need 3 times the area of Delft to compensate our emissions. Yeah, where do we find that forest? I don't think we can find it anywhere at the moment. Maybe we can help Southern Europe with replanting the forests, but I think most important perhaps is a new financial approach. We need to think in total cost of ownership, the full life cycle of what you decide to do, and also include a carbon price. And we decided to go for 150 euros per ton. The market price at the moment in Europe is 70, and it used to be 95 a few weeks ago. But we go for 150. And we're going to use that for all important financial decisions. Because otherwise you would only go for the cheapest solution, and we don't want the cheapest solution anymore, because the cheapest solution doesn't include external costs like environmental damage. So this is what we start with, and there's a whole set of measures we propose until 2030. So gradually you have to bring down our emissions. You can see that the Corona period, of course, had a little bit less emissions than normal. But gradually you have to get there. And in 2030 we still need a little bit of forest, because we can't logistically do everything before 2030. We can't renovate all the 33 buildings we have on the campus by that time, but we can get far. The energy system needs to become sustainable. This is planned for the new energy system, where we use geothermal heat as a main source of heat. And where we produce much more electricity on the campus. We of course need to renovate our big university buildings. These are all from the 1970s approximately, 1960s, 1970s, so they have to be improved. The biggest one, the tall tower we have, is already under refurbishment at the moment, so it's a circular retrofit we are doing. The new buildings we still need, and some educational buildings, because of the growth of our student population. They are energy neutral on the left-hand side and energy producing on the right-hand side. And the newest buildings that we need are going to be according to the new rules. Carbon positive, circular, climate adaptive, and contributing to livability. And it's going to be difficult, but these are buildings for the physics faculty that have a lot of labs that use enormous amounts of energy. But I said, yeah, you have to do it, because if you don't do it, who is going to save you, you know? So maybe we need a big wind turbine on the campus to do that. Nicer is that we also work with external parties on the campus, so spin-offs and startup companies from former students and so on. And there's also a sustainable caterer, and they are going to be our aquathermal energy pilot. So they're going to draw energy from the water next to the building, and the building itself is circular. Now, aquathermal, I think, in wet countries like mine, not Spain, but I think it's a big opportunity, because if we take the water at the moment in the Netherlands is already 2 degrees warmer than it used to be. So we are now 11 degrees on average. It used to be 9 degrees in 1900, and it's going to be 13 degrees within a decade, I think. The water is already 3 degrees warmer, because we also discharge waste heat into the water, power plants, industries, and so on. So if we take out the heat again, we get a better water quality. It's really bad at the moment, because there's a lot of algae and bacteria in it. We will also provide cooling in summer in cities, for instance. And for Dutch people, this is really important, that we enable ice skating again, because due to climate change, this has become a rarity at the moment. So if people understand that switching to a sustainable system can bring this back, then they will be much more supportive, of course, than just thinking about having to invest in renewable energy. So this is the positive side. So what we're going to do is watch the steps by all the projects we do with carbon savings, and then in the end see how much we still have to compensate for. We also look at commuter travel to the campus. As you can see, most staff is coming by bike in Delft, because that's the fastest way to get around. But we need to change the car use as well. Many people come by car and they live 5 to 25 kilometers from Delft. And that's very easy for an electric bike to be used. So we're trying to get that promoted. And then flying, of course. I told you that my greatest sin is flying, and especially the short distances have a lot of emissions. So we need to change that. So that's why, and looking at this, you know that flying the short distances has the biggest impact. Also driving a car alone is bad. So sometimes if I would take the car to Valencia, I could better fly, taking that distance. So we changed our policy now for international travel, and that, well, people know here that I came by train to Valencia. It takes you 16 hours, but it's a nice ride. You can work. It's first class, and but we said these green dots should only be reached by train from now on, and cannot be used for flying. And of course, some faculties like mine say, okay, the whole of Europe should be done by train or bus, and only if you have a good reason why not, then you can take the plane. So that's new policy. And if you are flying, we are going to raise an internal carbon tax, so that people have to pay more, and then we use that money to invest in sustainability projects and to help students travel sustainably. Now food, this is a difficult one, because if you look at food has a big difference in carbon emissions. And you can see that here, this is for the UK, this is for Italy, and then the figures are a little bit more favorable, so maybe Italy is closer to what you would have in Spain, but still you see a big difference between beef, for instance, and pork to vegetables. I did a calculation myself of the average Dutch consumer, and then you see that the carbon emissions of the average Dutchman are about twice as high as compared to a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet. So if you want to take climate action, you need to do something about it. We need to get away from animal products. So our Faculty of Architecture got a vegetarian restaurant, also the luxury faculty club that we have with the former cook of the king. He is also cooking vegetarian, and then the new building that also has a vegetarian restaurant. But it's only 3 out of 23, so there's still 20 places where you can get meat, so it's not that people don't eat meat. Now the funny thing is that the meat industry started attacking us immediately when we proposed to offer no meat anymore in the architecture canteen. they said, well, eating meat is bad for your students' brain. It's pity for the students, they will become stupid. But these are famous vegetarians. Do you recognize them? You probably recognize one or two. Yeah, so this is Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, and Albert Einstein, of course. These were all vegetarians, convinced, and you can't tell that they were stupid, right? Same with veganism. Veganism is unhealthy. Well, here you see famous vegans. Most people don't recognize the guy on the right-hand side. Some think it's... do you know who it is? No? Some think it's Seal, but it's not Seal. It's Carl Lewis, the athlete. He's also a vegan. So, and Morrissey, the singer, and Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall, of course, is the famous example of a chimpanzee expert. Anyway, the requirements are clear. I'm not saying that we should quit all animal products or quit all meat, but we need to get to a better balance, a sustainable balance. And there is scientific evidence for that, because the Lancet has produced a strong publication, scientifically supported, that we should get to this balance, the Eat Lancet diet. And there you see there's still some meat, but very little, what you eat every day. This is based on Americans, so it mentions chicken nuggets and so on, but you see a little bit of dairy, but most of it is plant-based now. But they found that by eating this ratio, everyone gets the right food, the healthy food, but it's done in a sustainable way. The earth can carry this. So that's where we're going, but we are also planning for food production on the campus, and then the smart technical food production, so thinking about horticultural, vertical farming, and combining it with buildings. And we think about making the campus greener and bluer, because we have to become more biodiverse, and it's better for climate adaptation. So these are a set of measures we are taking. If you want to know more, there's a sustainability website at TU Delft where you can have a look around. It's nice to mention that this action on the campus has been seen by the media already, because next week, in the National Climate Week in the Netherlands, our national radio is going to broadcast from our campus the whole week. So it's really nice that they're paying attention to it, finally. So, coming back to EcoMan, thank you, muchas gracias. And I want to say, become an eco-person yourself, and good luck with that.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Andy, por esta clase magistral y por el ejemplo, sobre todo. Yo creo que es una de las mejores cosas que transmite Andy, ¿no? El ejemplo de hacer a la vez que proponer, ¿no? Y eso, la verdad es que es... yo creo que aquí no está del todo implantado, ¿no? Tenemos ahí que aprender bastante. Bueno, hay un turno de preguntas ahora, tenemos algunos minutos. No sé si hay alguien del público que quiere preguntar algo o que quiere hacer algún comentario. Por ahí. No sé si hay micro o... Perfect.
All right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you start a new European project, I think you need to sort of account for more travel costs than you used to be in the past, because people are always counting with the prices of flights, which are usually too low. It's not that trains are expensive, flying is too cheap. That's the whole thing. So we need to take into account the prices of trains and other forms of sustainable transport. That's one. But if a project is already running, the way we do it at TU Delft is that we are planning to raise carbon tax on our own flights. So you don't have to pay that to the EU or to the airport company, but you have to basically give it to our executive board. They put it in a sustainability fund, and we are going to use that to support students and to support sustainable projects. So that's something, that's the only instrument we have to bring in extra money. Because the other things I showed, people don't have to pay more for their food or for everything we do on the campus, but we're trying to sort of use the carbon price to make unsustainable food more expensive and sustainable food cheaper. That's one thing. And if we do a building project and you have a contractor who comes with a proposal, a bid, they have a price with it, and we just ask, okay, this is your price, but what is your carbon emissions? And then they have to find out. They come back, and then we calculate 150 euros per ton to adjust that price. And then we compare it to the other alternatives, and then we choose the best one. So it doesn't mean that we pay more, it's more that we take the right decision by using the carbon price. But indeed, yeah, like you are struggling with people coming to the campus by car, we are also trying to sort of demotivate that by making parking regulated, but also by not supporting staff anymore in the purchase of a car or in travel distances by car. But to support them with a public transport card or with an electric bike. We're now trying to find out how to do that exactly, because it's legislation limited, but that's also an option. So I don't want people to pay more, I just want them to take the right decision as long as we don't have a carbon price included in Europe. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe it's interesting to mention, José Luis, it's that our executive board has decided to invest big time in sustainability on the campus. So about a month ago they decided to invest 95 million euro in the refurbishment of existing buildings in a new sustainable energy system in green on the campus until 2030. So that's a big amount of money, so 95 million. And I have 5 million extra to do other things, like to deal with mobility, food, organizing events, to make people aware. So there's quite a lot of money involved. And I think that's needed, because otherwise you won't get that leverage. Sorry.
I have another question. When we are debating about our own university or how to deal with this climate change and mitigation adaptation, we also put on the table research on solutions or research on new ways of new model business, etc. So what role plays this, like orienting research or trying to align research to the new challenges in your sustainability system?
Yeah, true. Well, you know, if you can only do research with external funding, like we actually do, then in Europe there's hardly any money for other things than sustainability, mobility, AI or ICT. But a lot of the money goes to climate and to circularity and to sustainable projects. So I think most researchers now are shifting naturally towards that, because they have to, if you want money for your research, you have to go for those topics. But indeed, I think as a university you can also say we're not going to do any research anymore funded by companies that are doing the wrong things, you know. At TU Delft we are supported by Shell, but they can only support research on renewables, on renewable fuels, on geothermal heat, on hydrogen, on cutting down emissions. So in the past they used to pay us a lot of money to do research on digging for gas and oil, but that's not allowed anymore. Even though they want to, we say no, we're not going to do that. I think that's also a choice the university can take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was thinking in my research center, for instance, more than 50% of our external funds come from private companies, so yeah. It's more tricky. It's trickier to tell them, okay, I'm not working with you because I don't like the things you do. But yeah, and it's also difficult to be told from somebody else not to work with them.
Yeah, that's true. But of course, you shouldn't close the door on them. But you should have a discussion with them because you know, climate action needs to be done by everyone. So you as academics know the science, and you need to tell them and to make them understand that they also have to shift their focus, and that you can help them to shift to a sustainable focus. And then they will still have the old-fashioned work they do, but you're not going to do research on that anymore because it doesn't help you society anymore. Mm-hmm. But it's a difficult discussion. We had the discussion with Shell, and we had the discussion with our pension fund. The pension fund was also investing in a lot of non-sustainable objectives, but together with other universities we forced them to quit that and to really go for only renewable investments. So yeah, I would say stand up and make your voice heard, because otherwise nobody will do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I really like the idea of the taxing, let's say, the carbon footprint. I think it's really is key. And I know that if we do it here, it will be like a war at UPV. But I really like it. Who decided the 150? How was that number decided?
It was based on scientific publications that were focused on, okay, what should be the actual carbon price? Because we have the European fluctuating price, which depends on how much demand is there and how much is offered. And it started once at 20 euros per ton, and now it's gone up to 95. It's dropped down a little bit, but it will go up again. But if you look at most of the sources, then they indicate that it should actually be around 125, 130 euros. But we thought we need to make it a bigger number also to compensate for the past and to make it a clearer number, so 150 euros. Some people say that it should actually a few hundred euros, but we thought let's stick to being close to science. Yeah.
And do you think that, because I was thinking, okay, if I want to buy, for instance, tobacco is becoming more and more expensive because of the taxes, right?
Yeah.
But that is not the real price of the tobacco, it's just a tax. Yeah. Maybe when we buy clothes or anything, then they should include this CO2 tax. Yeah. But then it reminds me about the energy labeling thing, that there should be kind of a common procedure of calculating the CO2 emissions, no? And then a kind of a European agreement, for instance, or maybe have you discuss this with the politicians of Delft city?
We follow the greenhouse gas protocol, which is an international protocol how to calculate carbon emissions for any type of emissions. So I think everyone should just follow that, and politics should follow that. And then, you know, you have to agree on what you include and what you don't include. We decided to include everything, scope 1, 2 and 3, upstream and downstream, because we saw that most of the emissions is from scope 3, which is the hardest to tackle. But if we want to get to zero, we need to do that. So that's why we decided to include everything. But not all companies or governments do that. No. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering if you know or you have used fundraising campaigns in order to fund some of the projects you have, or if you know any university who has done that.
Sorry, I didn't understand which.
Fundraising campaigns.
Oh, yeah.
In order to raise funds.
It's good
to ask society to help you achieve your goals.
Yeah. It's good you asked, Sandra, because in the money that we allocated from the executive board, the 95 million euros, 20 million is for an innovation fund that is going to be spent on living labs on the campus and innovations on the campus. But with that money, we intend to get more other funds also included. So with the 20 million, we want to get to 100 million by including research funds and support by companies from the market who want to test out their sustainable products. So in that sense, yeah, we need also extra funding because the university can't pay everything themselves. And otherwise, yeah, we try to convince the researchers, so that's related to the question of Thomas, we try to involve the researchers to propose research that can actually be tested on the campus, so that the research money that they get from the EU or from a national fund can actually be spent on the campus in improvement of the campus or the city of Delft. And I think that's also a different thing, because we used to be focused on all cities across the world and never on our campus. And I think we should start doing that. First get it done at home before you scale up to the city and the region and the country. I think, yeah, I will share my presentation, by the way, with you, okay? So you can put it on the website and share it. Okay, thank you.
Bien, vamos estupendamente con el tiempo. Vamos a presentar la siguiente intervención. Él es el profesor Per Lundqvist. Si quiere ir pasando al estrado, o bueno, va a presentar desde aquí. Okay. Él es doctor, catedrático de la unidad de termodinámica aplicada y refrigeración del KTH, del Royal Institute of Technology. Imparte docencia en una amplia gama de programas relacionados con energía, con el diseño, con los sistemas energéticos y la eficiencia energética. Y desde abril de 2021 es vicerrector de sostenibilidad del KTH y miembro del Living Lab del KTH. Así que, bienvenido. Su título de ponencia es The Living Lab Approach to Innovation and Co-Creation, a Place, a Method and a Model for Partnership.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. We are since long time dear friends with the university here, so it's great to be back here. And actually, this is my first flight, international flight, since I was faculty opponent here at the thesis in just a couple of weeks before the pandemic. So it's like goes all together. I work partly about half of my time I'm dealing with similar topics on the campus side of Royal Institute in Stockholm is a technical university. We have about 15,000 students, 6,000 staff, researchers and so forth. We are in 5 different campuses. We have a main campus in Stockholm quite centrally. We have similar plans and thoughts and discussions. What I'm going to talk about today is one of our research centra. So we are running now about 55 different centras like this, and it was also very interesting actually in the introduction to hear that this coalition between universities, because we started June 1st this year, actually we started a new coalition with the other 2 big universities in Stockholm. So we have the Stockholm, we call ourselves Stockholm Trio, because 3 universities make sense. Stockholm Trio for Sustainable Actions. So we are also working quite closely now also in that sense with the city. So it's very nice to, and that, so we also, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk specifically about how actually to, what can you do with the Living Lab and what have we done, and a little bit, I would like to also acknowledge my colleagues working with this, especially Jonas Annenvogel, who is the director, and he knows most of it. A little bit of the agenda. I made some motivation. I don't think we need more motivation now after the previous talk, so thanks for that. We can speed up. Excellent, already in the beginning and also. But I will talk a little bit about the idea of living labs, what it is. I will talk about our efforts, what we have done. I will talk about it as a resource for research. I will talk about it as a resource for education. I will talk a few notes on the operation and the business model, because that's something that is quite important for to make it sustainable when it comes to funding and so on. And then a few concluding remarks. Yeah, just the way it was closing, as we talked about, and this report came out Monday, I think, this week. So I just encourage everyone to take a look at it. And we are on a track for 2.8 degrees zero. So it's quite urgent that we look into it. And actually, in the report, there are basically 4 areas pointed out, and one is actually the built environment. Then we have like electricity and transport, of course, and so forth. But the built environment. So there are some advices in this report, and there are, of course, some trends and so forth, and we can all look on that. But interestingly, we also mentioned this per capita greenhouse gas emissions, including land use effects. We see in the report, they treat Europe as one country, which is quite interesting. First time for me. But we are on kind of a slow progress, and the blue line there now at some 9 tons. Yeah, a lot of work to be done, obviously. And there's some very discouraging trends for some other countries, as you can see. Well, the challenge for the built environment, so we know that 40% about global energy and CO2 emissions, but there are so many new technologies available, and there are a lot of good ideas, several of them mentioned in the previous presentation. Why are those systems not used to the extent they could be, and why is the process of implementing them so slow? Well, when we started this some almost 10 years ago now, we said we need to do something that could speed up innovation. So we said the purpose of the Living Lab is to reduce the lead times between research results and market introduction. So we should make the resource effective buildings and the city of the future as fast as possible. And you know, everyone heard about the TRL scale and all those activities that we are going from basic research and so forth. Can translate it. I made this one. Next slide is not so beautiful, but I made it yesterday on the plane. So basically. But this is the situation in many, if you're a startup or if you're trying to do something, on the blue line is the money that could be available for your idea, and the red line is the money available to develop it. And one of the things we try to do to be there in the middle there to facilitate and cut down those costs. So that's one of the things I just realized at the end of working on my presentation that hadn't talked so much about this, but this is really very difficult for new technologies. I think the biggest threat to innovation is risk management, you know, and that was also mentioned, but we will come back to that. But this is a situation where we can actually help to bridge between the labs, the new ideas into the market. So if you try to figure out what is a Living Lab, is there a definition? And of course there are attempts to do it. So it should be some sort of open innovation ecosystem, and it should be in a real life environment. It should have those iterative feedback processes. There should be possibilities for co-creation, rapid prototyping, testing, scaling up innovations, or even businesses, or providing different types of joint value to the involved stakeholders. And the third one is very important, to operate as an orchestrator. So, and who are part of it? There's so many different types of living labs, so it's kind of hard to look at one and figure out what is the, but there's quite variety. So according to the European network of living labs called ENOL, they suggest that there are 4 types, basically, that you can find. So you have the urban rural living labs. Typically in Amsterdam, there's quite strong activities. Or it could be on the campus. So the campus was not in their definition, but I think that's one of the key things for us to really utilize the campus. And we are looking exactly at the same opportunities as in Delft for that purpose. But it also could be a research-driven living lab where you focus on research, and we have all different topics, so trying to have a more sort of problem-driven or challenge-driven approach, bringing different researchers from different departments together, solving problems. It could be the type of living test bed, where we focus on the acceptance of new technologies, prove that they're actually working in a living context with people at work, at home, or whatever. Or it could be the last one, living labs as a service, where you actually provide this opportunity, for instance, for startups to be there, try out their ideas for a shorter time, getting access to data, etc., etc. So, and what we find that we are actually doing all of this in a sense, but in different projects. So it's very hard to actually define what is, so it's very, very contextual. It really depends on what you like, what you want to do, and what are your possibilities. So the key elements, what you have to do, is the orchestration. You have to really be there, and we had a policy from the beginning that we are not going to do any research within the orchestration, let's say. We want the other departments to be active. So we are not going to be a competition with the rest of the faculties. It's very important that they find us as a partner, as a facilitator, helping out with funding, applications, bringing together new teams that did not meet before, etc. Also providing this multi-stakeholder participation, having the active user involvement. I will show a couple of examples from projects. Co-creation, it should be real-life settings, of course, and it has to be a multi-method approach. So those are things that one need to think about. And there's a lot of text on some of the slides. But I thought this could be a little bit as a manual for setting up a living lab. So the slides are not meant to be read now, but maybe it could be useful if you have a little bit more time. So what we have done here is, we call it the Research Center for Accelerated Innovation in the Built Environment. So basically it's 3 things. It's test infrastructures, which are physical platforms for collaboration, and we call them test beds. So we were playing a lot with the naming of different parts. From the beginning, the test beds were the living lab. But then we realized that the living lab is not the physical environment in our case, it's actually the way we work. So the test beds are where we apply the living lab approach, basically. So it's more a way of working together than the actual physical environment. So we have, right now we are operating 3 test beds, but we are also connecting a couple of externally. We have in a city north of Stockholm, we are developing a new housing area. We are connecting the housing area as a supplementary test bed. So this is very attractive because we have the infrastructure to help them to collect data. So that will be a housing area for, let's say, families and normal people, whereas we have students in our house. So that's a little bit of a... and then we also have the data sharing, the data pool, storing, sharing data, making data available, making data sets available for research. Certain data, when you work with people, has to be taken. There's quite a lot of GDPR issues with the privacy and so forth when you start doing measurements. We had a couple of projects where the students were wearing sensors on their bodies to check sleep and eating and different behavior, and then you have to be very careful in the sense of how you share data. So you have to anonymize data. So there's quite some work on that. And then there's the collaboration platform, and that's the interface where the method is applied. So I will go through the 3 test beds. So the first one is what we call our own flexible. And this is actually, the whole project started with a donation. So that was actually the question about whether we can get, that was an idea we proposed when student housing was going to be built on the campus. We proposed to one of the companies that if they would donate sufficient funding to set up a laboratory, they could also be part of building up the student housing areas. So this is financed through a donation. And this is, in Sweden there's a building, you need a certain building permits, building laws to follow and so forth. This one is exempt from that, so we are not obliged to follow the regulations for over a period of 10 years. And then we have to apply for a new exempt from that, meaning that we can make sizes of doors or whatever in different shapes and forms. Otherwise, we are kind of tied in apartments to that. So we made it with movable floors and roof and like you see it here. And then under it we have let's say a machine room that is also used for seminars and so forth. It's not so big, but it's very, very flexible. So we can do changes very rapidly in this. And the idea here was to put in as many sensors that we could possibly think of. So it's temperature measurements, relative humidity, CO2, ventilation, window openings, pressure, noise, of course water used, hot water, electricity metering in every outlet individually, occupancy detection, and also one project that haven't really succeeded yet is to also have an allergen sensor. So this is something that you have to think about from the beginning and how to make sure those are connected, whether you want to go wired or wireless. We actually went both ways. We could not trust the wireless, so in the first version we doubled in both wired and wireless just to make sure that we got the same readings. And so there's a lot of possibilities to collect and share data. This has opened up a lot of projects. We sent data sets to researchers in other universities. We have we have had a lot of master students doing machine learning on data sets and so forth. So it's kind of a useful resource to have. The second test bed is more related to, let's say, building innovation at large. So it's a plus energy building with a geothermal heat pump system. So it's about the roof is covered with solar PV. We recover the energy from the wastewater with 64 heat exchangers. So that's the biggest. I think no one has done such an extensive recovery of wastewater. And then we have the ground source heat pumps, hot water storage for hot water, and now since this summer also together with the company Northvolt, lithium ion energy storage that will be doubled. So this is just the first installation, and that is to increase the self-usage of electricity, obviously. And we are also, we landed also a project on energy storage using PCM materials. So this opens up a lot of very, very interesting possibilities to elaborate on operating strategies, because we can, and now with the new situation in electricity market in Sweden has been just crazy since, so the prices can go between almost up to not really €1, but 0.6 maybe, and down to 0.00 something, almost for free in the night, and then it goes really up and down. So this flex possibilities and storage is really interesting to look at. So this is and here's 305 student apartments. So all apartments are also equipped with basic sensors. So we measure electricity use, hot water, cold water, CO2 levels, and indoor temperature, and so forth. So we can do, and we have a couple of projects running where we can look at more behavioral side of trying nudging campaigns and different ways to nudge the students to shift the behavior and so forth. And then the third test bed is owned by the company that in Sweden we have this state-owned property company that we rent our premises from, academic housing. So this is a building that our students recognize. What do you call it? Yeah. So when this came, we thought it was this Hans and Grete story, you know, with the witch and the candy on the roof, and you can eat it and so forth. Yeah, exactly. The pepper gingerbread house, exactly. This is also built from the beginning to be an educational tool. So it's built to encourage learning and education. So there's a lot of visible installations and so forth. And we have a 3-year education for building engineers that can use the building also as a laboratory. But it's also extensively equipped with sensors, so we can do certain experiments. And here we are planning now an experiment now in this winter where we will lower temperatures in the rooms and see whether the acceptance of lower indoor temperatures can be nudged if you understand the benefit of it. So we are going to try with different groups. So some groups will have the information that we are lowering the temperature to save money. Other groups are going to be informed that we are saving this much CO2 and so forth. And then we will see what is the acceptance to having this little bit fluctuating climate indoors. So it's a new research project. So we have been into a lot of different areas. So I will go a little bit into project examples now. But since we talked about heat pumps, the coefficient of performance is very important, as you know about heat pump. And for this is The coefficient of performance is not related to energy, it's related to how much research funding can we get by spending the money from the university. So far, our COP is 27.5. This is a very strong motivation. So for every million or whatever we put in from the university side in this, we get 27.5 from research funding or private companies. So this shows that the concept really is attractive. So we've been into health, behavior, digital services, business models, laws, regulation, building ICT controls, data integrity, of course, a lot of sustainability projects, also a project on co-living that I will mention a little bit. And these are some examples of projects. We had a project about allergen-free indoor environments where we stopped. The reason why the project stopped was because the researchers got huge cancer funding. So we could not compete because they could not get as much money for allergic research on allergies. It's not so important as cancer. So the group shifted their focus because of huge donations on cancer funding. But we were really hoping to have students living, allergic students living with cats, and then trying to detect with sensors the allergens, but at the same time clean the cats. So there was an initial idea on a cat cleaning. You think about a really small car wash, and then you feed the cat into this really small car wash, and then you will never see that cat again. But that was kind of an interesting project. So this is just some numbers, but we started 2015, and there were 3 applications made, research applications. 2 of them were funded and started. And then there's sort of a lag and delay, and this is the evolution we had so far. What is quite interesting here is that the hit rate, that's another COP, coefficient of performance. If you apply for funding, what is the chance that you will get funded? And so our hit rate is almost 50% for the researchers, which is extremely high. Normally you would expect 10%. So, and as far as I got an update here is that we had also this year 30 new started projects. So applications and starting is a little bit of a lagging process. So there's a lot of things going on. Now, what would you think? Is shared living better than single households? Do you recognize the place to the left? Anyone? Denisova Cave, where Homo sapiens lived for many, many years with Neanderthals together in the cave. So we started a project together with a builder to build 11,000 new sustainable student housings in Sweden. So what should they look like? What should they go for? And this is built in several campuses in the universities. So when we started out, the first version of this small lab, we had 4 apartments, very traditional student housing, like studios. And then I will come back to that. In a project together with architecture students, in one of their semesters, they developed several different proposals how to improve the concept. And the winning solution that we actually built there is the one in the middle there. And then in this project Co-Kitchen or Co-Living, it's called Co-Kitchen, the project. We redesigned this one to this model here in, is it time? No, it's not the time. Oh. So you can see the evolution here, and because of the way we built this, it's relatively easy to actually remodel and change, and we can just move around. And this project has been quite interesting results actually, because we can, in the same area, we can really increase the livable area for the students quite significantly. So sorry for the Swedish here. But you see you really lower the climate impact of the buildings and the building materials in this concept. Much less equipment, much less stuff built in. So removing walls, removing stuff, basically cut down emissions about 7%. It looks very much the same. But what was quite interesting results, the new living place was so attractive for other students to come there. So when we looked at the data for energy consumption, it actually, we don't know if they have guests, friends over. So you see energy consumption per person went up, water consumption doubled, number of initiations of water usage. Every time someone turns a tap, you see it goes up a lot, and the water consumption time per person also went up. So what we actually created was a more sustainable building in the sense of building materials, but actually so much more attractive place to visit. So it was always crowded. So from that point of view, it was a bit of a failed experiment, in a sense, but successful as a way of moving forward. Another project where we went a little bit closer to students was to put sensors on the students. This project was about to develop what we call living services portfolio. A couple of different services for the students that was co-created with the students living there. And for instance, a ring on the fingers called Aura Ring. Perhaps you heard of it. It's I think Finnish invention. Where you actually measure sleeping patterns, blood pressure, pulse, a lot of data, and this was quite extensive ethical approval process to get it through. This is actually from Swedish TV. So the reporters they don't, you can't stop them. And this has been quite actually visited place, this lab. So we had one visit from the Swedish royals, the crown princess, and some people from the royal family coming over, and they were visiting the students. So we had informed the students clearly that they would come at a certain time. But they had mistook the day. So when they were in there, they had not cleaned, they had not, and one student stepped out of the shower with a towel around, saying hello to those kind of. This is from a TV, but on the top there you can see the heat exchanger for recovering heat, and this is also collaboration with another living lab in Gothenburg at Chalmers University, which is called HSB Living Lab, where they are looking also at grey water usage and so forth. And a recent project started this year is to look at buildings post-corona, so looking especially on how particles and CO2 levels, particles, and indoor air quality, how they spread among buildings. So it's basically measurements done on particles, but also computer simulations and CFD modeling and stuff like that. So a bit of a messy slide, but for education, there's sort of a linear approach to learning at universities, where the professors give the students a problem, well curated, and then the students solve the problem and then they're examined. So that's very traditional linear. So now what is quite popular now, and it's spreading a lot, is a more challenge-driven learning, and this is what our students were doing in the course. They presented yesterday and so. But then there's a challenge, so it's not really clear what to do. So it's actually the students' task to formulate the problem, and then you have to perhaps also choose methods to solve the problem, which is not given, but they could be hinted and so forth. And then there's some sort of examination, and then there's a reflection on it. What we have seen here is that if we do these kind of projects in this living lab context, then that adds an really added value, because then there's a lot of things you don't have to say, and you just provide, let's say, you're in this mess of a lot of unsolved problems. You can even leave the challenge to the students to define. In our course, when we worked with the students, we pretty much defined the challenge. But in the sense of being here, you can start in any box. So this is something that we are really working now to develop together with the faculties, to allow the students from several different faculties and programs to meet and identify problems that they can find in this ecosystem of companies or labs and so forth. So this is really an opportunity also, having a living lab, because we have the data acquisition in place, so the students can specify what data they need and so forth. So it allows a lot of creative for teachers and to create new exciting courses. So we did in one course a year ago, we had a 1-week challenge with industry, a company that makes, you see in the middle there, those taps for hot and cold water. They had developed taps that basically have they connect to the wireless net of the house. But then the company didn't really think about if anyone would like to do that, or why should I do it? What can it do? So the challenge for the student was to develop a smart home application for sustainable water use with associated business model, and they had to present the work, and they had to write in a professional way, and they had to develop and present this innovative idea, and of course taking into account sustainability issues and so, and even developing the app for it. And this was a 1-week project, and it was possible because all the data was there, and so students got the challenge on Monday 10 o'clock, and then they presented after lunch Friday, and they just love it. It's fantastic to work in this way. So this is there were 8 groups, so this is the app, the look of the app from one of the groups. So it's kind of nice that you, and it's sorry in Swedish here about register a new user and your settings, and this is the way it worked. And Alfred was the best this week because he's, so good work, Alfred. So it's kind of boosting, there's a difference between nudging and boosting. Boosting is when you tell people afterwards that they did great. So this is architecture students working on different plans. So they came up with these initial ideas. So this was actually the first, you see the second one with actually moving sliding doors, that we had a little bit of a problem to actually realize in this. But this became the 2.0 solution we tried out in the lab. And the drawback of that solution was it was always too noisy. There was nowhere to get peace and quiet, basically, because everyone was in the joint room. There was nowhere to sneak, and the sound was leaking into the rooms from people chatting in the middle of the night and so forth. Yeah. So for learning, students really love to be in these real test beds. But what we lack is the multidisciplinary courses with the mixed student groups. And that's something I'm pushing now from my vice rector role as sustainability, to allow for the master programs to open a little bit up for more cross-disciplinary or multidisciplinary learning in courses. This is when we cram the students into a room, and then we show the ppm level of CO2 directly on the screen. Then they understand how it works with indoor air, and they can also sense it when you can hardly breathe. How are we on time? Sorry for 5 minutes, or okay. Here's the boring stuff about how to operate this now, a couple of slides. But so basically, what are we doing? We create value by using a lot of the cost industry have anyway for the internal R&D, and we can use that as co-funding in applications. So whenever the company spends something in a project, they want to try it, we can use that when we apply for funding as a co-funding opportunity. So that's one of the key factors why the hit rate is so good for applications. We can show that we have very strong joint co-funding from industry, which is usually considered a plus. And then we get access to the government funding for a lot of researchers coming from different departments, and they will investigate an area of mutual interest and then hopefully help to accelerate innovation and reduce climate impact. But there's so many different projects going on, but we have this kind of a idea that that things run in a loop. So if you visit the homepage, you will see that we have developed 3 different portals. One is for companies that would like to try something, test something, or one other way of filing a request is from a researcher that would like to investigate something, and the third is for students that would like to do something they have come up with. And then we treat that and then we have one sort of a board that looks at those ideas and prioritizes, and then we also have a board looking at the more long-range funding. But it's very important that we can give very quick feedback on ideas and things, and then we operate on a loop where one of the core activities actually is to build trust, and IPR, for instance, how do we deal with ideas and intellectual property rights and so forth? So things don't slip out from the system, let's say. And so we had these. In Swedish, is fika först, forska sen. It doesn't make sense, but it means we drink coffee first and then we do the research. So it's always some sitting down and getting to learn each other. And then there's a lot of support activities, some projects, applications, helping to write applications, and then basically we take a small fee from each project to fund the operation. So that's our business model. And yeah, time planning and so forth. If you look at the construction industry, they have worked hard to overcome many technological barriers, of course, but they are very poor at transferring sufficient knowledge and competence also for maintenance and operations. And that's one of the reasons why there is also big nervosity when systems get complex, when there are many the building we have with the heat pumps, the solar PV, the lithium-ion battery, the storage, that's for any control company, it's a nightmare. They really don't like that. So organizing complex systems, and I think to buildings to be really, in this sense, of course you should simplify as much as possible, and I really agree on this, to start with this ladder of looking at the place and the possibilities to be as efficient as possible. But there is always a risk that you need to combine systems in a way that they are not used to. But then there's also barriers when it comes to behavior and organization and structure. So we have had a couple of research projects also on looking at what is hindering innovation in the built environment. So it's more socio-technical studies, looking at trying to understand what are the, and this particular PhD found something like 42 different barriers in the industry for innovation. So that's a bit discouraging, but that's something that has to be everything from risk or knowledge gaps to, so there's a lot of, and actually servicing, operating is also something that we need to educate. So if you're interested and have time, and you will get the presentations, I guess, so all those 3 links goes in, that you can go in, it's sort of a 3D navigation, so you can walk around in those different environments. So the first one is on the top of, you can see the whole thing, and then the other one you can walk around in the apartment, in the third version we are running now, and in the third one is, you can look a little bit in the machine room, and you can see that open doors there is where all the wired sensors comes in. So it's a lot of cables going. So we'll stop there, and if there are questions, this is the link. Jonas G.A. Vogel, he's the director. He knows all the details, really. I'm chairing the board for it. I know basically most of it, but I don't know all the details with all the projects. So, and these are the current Centra funders now from industry, which is one property owner. It's academic housing, which we rent our premises from the campus, and Schneider Electric is well known, and then Bengt Dahlgren is a consultancy firm in Stockholm. So they are funding also in cash funding for the operation of the Centra. We are looking now to extend with the city of Stockholm is going to step in from 1st of January, which is great. So we will probably pick schools as test beds, because we think that's also an opportunity to bring in students and kids into it. So, but it's yet to be defined whether it should be schools or whether it should go into the hospitals. So it's to be decided. So I will stop there, and if there are any questions, I'm super happy to answer.
So, also thank you for your very interesting speech. We have learned a lot, and some questions came to mind. So I have some questions. Maybe I will ask them together, and then you can answer as you please. My first comment or question is about experiments. I mean, I understand people shouldn't be aware of being in an experiment if you want to really have an experiment. But on the other hand, we are missing the opportunity of educating them. So like a little, I have your presentation, but like some elaboration. Then there is another issue with the rules. I mean, because we believe a sandbox exempt, as you mentioned, because otherwise it takes too long to get all the permits. Then you cannot choose the supplier, you like make the call, etc. And finally, thinking about experiments and some comments about that.
Okay. Yeah, on the first is a really good question, because I'm on the board of a research program in Sweden called Design for Energy Efficient Everyday Life. So we are giving out funding to a lot of different research projects, not just in our university. And there's always a debate there between psychology and engineers, and so we tend to oversimplify our conception of human behavior. So we don't really understand it. But so there's always a trade-off in the sense of doing. For one example of project is done by the philosophy department in our university for the 305 department. So the idea with that project is that the students are informed that we are doing a project where we are trying to understand behavior shifts. And they will get certain information and they are free to act on that, basically. And then they provide different information to the different students. So one group is exposed to nudging, which is basically making it easy to take the right decisions, kind of pushing them in a direction. One group of students is exposed to more like a boosting, where you afterwards inform them on their behaviors and so forth. And the third control group, they get some sort of phony information that is not very clear and so forth. And then they're trying to compare. So that's one way of, you have to inform them to get the consent for their personal data, according to the GDPR. So you have to be smart about how you do it. If you have to inform them what is this study about, otherwise you cannot use their data. But then you can give a little bit different information. So you have to. So that's kind of cleverly designed project in the sense of the students who live in the research lab, they have applied to live there, because we cannot take in students that are not aware of the fact that this is going to be a lot of people running in and out and changing sensors and things and moving. Sorry, but you're just moving your bathroom, or so they are aware of it. So they're, I mean, you have to take their behavior into. So they are more of a co-creation kind of research, where they actually co-create the solutions. So it's very hard to generalize what they do into anything. Second question was?
Assumption of rules or assumption of the bureaucratic.
Yeah, exactly. That, from the beginning, that was part of the whole package for this building complex, that we said that one part of this, so basically when the bid was set up, it was said that it should contain something that could provide experimental opportunities for the university. And then one of the bids suggested this, the one we went for, suggested to apply for this free building permit free, where we can change everything, but not the external facade. So there's a limitation there. So if we would like to put up solar PVs on the facade or something, then we have to apply for that. But everything else is so we don't have to follow handicap rules, for instance, where you have certain size of doors and things. So that was clear, but that was a 10-year exempt, and then we have to apply again. So the city, actually I don't exactly know, but I guess it's on the city architect side somewhere dealing with this. They were happy to support it, so it was very quick, and it was many years ago. But there was no objection on this as an experimental environment. So, and the third.
Well, it was like a reflection on if test beds, I guess you want to prove that it actually works. So if it doesn't, you mentioned this example of making a sustainable building that actually the use and maintenance was less sustainable. So, this is discouraging or not? Or
yeah, but you can expect a lot of things. But we had more visits for this plus energy building with the heat storage. Much more time to adjust the control systems and things. So they spent way more time. But everyone understands that this is a pilot. So the builder is very keen to explore these opportunities. So I don't think anyone objects to that. So I don't think anyone would see it as a result that it takes more time. But now is actually a proposal to have also sort of lifelong learning courses related to building controls. So they asked whether we would like to participate in that, because then perhaps we could to put it a little bit forward in time, and as previous speaker also, that we're using yesterday's systems for tomorrow's buildings. So also what kind of control can we expect, and what kind of competences are really needed for those who are going to work there. So it's a different job to be in building maintenance in the future than it used to be. You have to be a little bit of a computer wizard too also, fortunately, because there's a lot of interaction with the systems. So. Yeah. That's one of the interests why Schneider is also part of it, because they're also quite progressive in the sense they see this future.
Next question. Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Rafael Royo from the engineering school. I don't know if you know our first living lab in the university is placed in a special building only with classrooms, and I would like to have your experience for the things, the matters we can test in this building, because I don't know if you have all the information about this first living lab.
Not yet.
But would be interesting to give him the information, and in that way we can try to have all the results and all the things we can make with this building, because it's a pre-existing building. It's built. So what's the thing we can offer to the students to think about, to all these things I believe would be interesting for your experience.
Yeah, but what I would suggest is that when we know more about it, we could set up some joint Zoom, mini conference, and bring some of our colleagues also looking at our educational building and what sensors are there and what we done, and so on. Then we could just have ideas tossed around, because there are a little bit different climatic situations, and there's a lot of heating in Stockholm, obviously, not much cooling, but some, and so on. But certainly that would be super interesting. And I think also the opportunity, one thing that we have not tried to use our lab as a tool in FP7 collaboration projects, because we simply had so much going on all the time, so we don't have the resources to do that. So our director is sweating, and oh, now it's 4 new projects, and now they want to do this, and it's running around, and but that's going to be the strategy now from next year. We have to go out and collaborate more with others and share data and so forth. So I think really comparing and sharing is a super big opportunity. And there is a new lab also starting in southern Sweden, Lund University in close to Malmö, southern Sweden, and also we have this in Gothenburg, and then there's also an activity going on in northern Sweden in the city of Umeå. So we are talking now about forming sort of a joint coalition of those 4 labs to work more closely in Sweden also to share experience and so on. So we are actually writing now an application to fund sort of a joint platform to share data. So there's other experience, and they are all different. They have different focus. And so I think Lund University will also have a focus on elderly people and health, and so there's a different focus. Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
Vamos a hacer ahora una pausa para tomar un café, o lo que queramos, y volvemos en 20 minutos. ¿20 minutos? Muy bien.
No entendía los gestos. Ah, no, ya se lo había dado. La próxima.